He braided his black beard into fuses, lit them before battle. Smoke curled around his face like something that crawled out of hell. And it worked. No one who saw Blackbeard coming ever forgot it. The golden age of piracy lasted barely 50 years. From roughly 1680 to 1730, a few hundred men terrorized every major shipping lane on Earth. They became legends. And then, one by one, they died. The way each of them went out tells you exactly who they were. Blackbeard's real name was Edward Teach. At his peak, he commanded the Queen Anne's Revenge, a 40-gun warship, 300 men, one of the most feared vessels on the Atlantic. In 1718, he blockaded the entire port of Charleston for a week, held prominent citizens hostage, extracted whatever he wanted, then sailed away. For 2 years, no governor, no Navy fleet, no rival could touch him. But Virginia's governor, Alexander Spotswood, had seen enough. He sent Lieutenant Robert Maynard with 2 sloops and orders to bring back Blackbeard's head. In November 1718, Maynard tracked him to a shallow cove at Ocracoke Island. It was exactly the kind of place a man hides when he doesn't think anyone is looking. Blackbeard didn't run. He grabbed a glass of wine, toasted the incoming ships, and shouted across the water, "Damnation seize my soul if I give you quarters or take any from you." Then he opened fire. The first broadside killed a third of Maynard's crew. Thinking he'd won, Blackbeard boarded to finish them. But Maynard had hidden his surviving men below deck. They burst out together. 6 brutal minutes of fighting followed. Blackbeard took 5 musket balls, 20 sword cuts. He kept moving. A Highlander finally slashed his neck from behind. The second swing took his head clean off. Maynard hung the head from his bowsprit. They mounted it on a pole at Chesapeake Bay, where it rotted for years. His body went overboard. Legend says it swam 3 laps around the ship before sinking. His skull was eventually turned into a silver-lined drinking cup used in taverns for decades. Even dead, Blackbeard was a story no one could stop telling. Captain William Kidd might be the most famous pirate in history. There is just one problem. He probably wasn't a pirate at all. In 1695, King William III personally commissioned Kidd to hunt pirates in the Indian Ocean. He was a respected New York captain, a wealthy property owner. The crown called him trusty and well-beloved. He set out with a proper letter of marque, legal authorization to seize enemy vessels. This was not a criminal operation. It was a government contract. Then everything fell apart. A third of his crew died from disease before they reached their hunting grounds. The survivors turned mutinous. Under pressure, Kidd seized a ship called the Quedagh Merchant, but he kept the French passes that proved it was a legal wartime capture. He had documentation. He had his orders. He thought he was protected. He was wrong. By the time he returned to England, the political winds had shifted. His powerful sponsors had been replaced. England needed a scapegoat to appease foreign powers outraged by piracy. Kidd was perfect. Governor Bellamont lured him to Boston with a promise of pardon, then had him arrested the moment he stepped ashore. He spent 2 years in Newgate Prison. His trial lasted 2 days. The French passes, the only evidence that could have saved him, mysteriously vanished from court records. The only witnesses were mutinous crewmen who received pardons in exchange for their testimony against him. On May 23, 1701, they brought him to the gallows completely drunk. Someone in the crowd had taken pity and given him enough alcohol that he could barely stand. They put the noose around his neck and dropped him. The rope snapped. The crowd shouted that it was a sign from God. The executioners hanged him a second time. This time, the rope held. Then they coated his corpse in tar, locked it inside an iron cage, and hung it over the Thames, where it rotted for 3 years as a warning to every sailor who passed. Treasure hunters have searched for Kidd's buried gold for 3 centuries. They have never found it, because it probably never existed. If you think Blackbeard was terrifying, you have never heard of François l'Olonnais. The Spanish called him the Bane of Spain. Their sailors would sink their own ships rather than surrender to him. L'Olonnais arrived in the Caribbean as an indentured servant, property, not a person. The Spanish worked him until he collapsed. When he was finally free, he had one purpose: revenge. Early in his career, soldiers ambushed his crew and killed everyone. L'Ollonais survived by covering himself in the blood of his dead men and hiding among the corpses until the soldiers left. He lay still for hours while bodies cooled around him. Then he got up and walked away. He never forgot it. After capturing a Spanish ship, he beheaded every member of the crew except one. That survivor was sent to Havana carrying a message. "I shall never give quarter to any Spaniard whatsoever." He meant it. L'Ollonais was a craftsman of pain. He sliced flesh from victims piece by piece. He tied rope around their heads and twisted until their eyes popped from the sockets. He burned people alive and watched without flinching. In 1667, near San Pedro, he captured 2 Spanish soldiers, drew his cutlass, cut open one man's chest, ripped out the beating heart with his bare hands, and bit into it like an animal. Then he looked at the other soldier and said, "I will serve you all alike if you don't show me another way." Karma arrived in 1669. His ship ran aground near Panama. The Kuna tribe captured him. They knew exactly who he was. They did to him everything he had done to others, tore him apart limb by limb while he was still alive, fed the pieces to a fire, and scattered his ashes so not a single trace of him would remain anywhere on Earth. Edward Lowe was so cruel that even other pirates called him a maniac. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who spent years researching historical records, described him as a man of amazing and grotesque brutality. Lowe started in Boston as a rigger on merchant ships. He had a wife, a daughter. When his wife died in childbirth in 1720, something in him came loose that was never going to be put back. He turned pirate in 1721. For 3 years, he terrorized both sides of the Atlantic, capturing over 100 ships. His specialty was cruelty. When a French cook on a captured vessel annoyed him, Lowe burned the entire ship with the man still tied to the mast. He told his crew the man would fry well, but his most infamous act came in 1723. A Portuguese captain, knowing Lowe's reputation, dropped 11,000 gold coins into the sea rather than let him have them. Lowe flew into a rage. He slashed off the captain's lips with his cutlass, had them grilled over a fire, and forced the man to eat them while they were still hot. Then he killed the entire crew. Even pirates have limits. In 1724, his own crew voted him out. They put him in a small open boat with 2 men, no food and no water. They left him to die in the Atlantic. A French ship found them half dead days later and brought Lowe to Martinique. When French authorities realized who they had, they hanged him before he could say a word. Some accounts suggest he escaped and surfaced years later, working as a gunner on a Spanish warship. Either way, the Atlantic was quieter without him. Stede Bonnet proves that money cannot buy competence. In 1717, Bonnet was living the dream in Barbados. He owned a 400-acre sugar plantation. He had a wife, 4 children, and more money than he could spend. He was among the wealthiest men on the island. Then, one morning, he walked away from all of it and decided to become a pirate. Nobody knows why. Some said he was escaping a difficult marriage. Others believed he had suffered some kind of breakdown. Whatever the reason, his approach was bizarre. While every other pirate in history stole their ships, Bonnet bought one. He hired a professional crew and paid them fixed salaries. There was only one problem: he had no idea how to sail. He didn't know seamanship, navigation, or combat. His crew tolerated him because he kept paying. His fellow pirates laughed. When he encountered Blackbeard, the legendary captain immediately recognized an opportunity. Blackbeard essentially took him prisoner on his own ship, stripped command from him, and eventually stole all their loot and marooned his crew. Bonnet eventually resumed piracy on his own, was captured after a brutal 6-hour battle on the Cape Fear River, escaped from prison, and was swiftly recaptured. At his execution on December 10th, 1718, the gentleman pirate arrived a broken man. He had spent his final days writing desperate letters to the governor, begging for mercy, offering to become a personal servant if only they would spare him. He clutched a bouquet of flowers as he walked to the gallows, weeping openly in front of the crowd. Charleston women petitioned for his life 7 times. 7 times. The execution was postponed. It went forward on the 8th. They buried him in the marsh. Black Caesar was an African chief who became a slave who became one of the most feared pirates in the Florida Keys. According to the accounts that survive, Caesar was a powerful tribal leader in West Africa who evaded slave traders for years through intelligence and force. One captain finally tricked him with a gold watch, promising greater treasures aboard his ship. Once Caesar and his warriors were on board, the vessel quietly sailed. By the time they understood what had happened, they were already at sea. During the crossing, Caesar refused to eat. He would have starved himself to death if not for a sailor who befriended him and smuggled him food in secret. When a hurricane destroyed the ship near Florida, those two men escaped together on a longboat as the only survivors. Free again, they became pirates. They posed as shipwrecked sailors, waited for passing ships to offer aid, then robbed them at gunpoint. They buried treasure on Elliott Key, and their partnership ended the way many partnerships do over a woman. Both men wanted the same woman from a captured ship. Caesar killed his only friend in a duel. He built an empire in the Florida Keys. At his peak, he kept more than 100 kidnapped women and a prison camp for hostages. When he left on raids, he sometimes forgot to leave food. People starved. Eventually, Caesar joined Blackbeard's crew. When Blackbeard was cornered by the Royal Navy at Ocracoke in 1718, he gave Caesar one final order. If they lost the fight, blow up the ship and take everyone with them. Caesar stood in the powder room with a lit match. Two prisoners tackled him from behind seconds before he could light the fuse. They dragged him to Williamsburg and hanged him in chains. The man who had once been a chief, who had crossed an ocean against his will and built himself a kingdom in the Keys, ended his life swinging from a rope on the same coastline where he had once been free. William Fly had one of the shortest pirate careers in recorded history, just 3 months. But his death is considered by historians to be the true end of the golden age of piracy. In April 1726, Fly signed on as boatswain aboard the Elizabeth, bound for West Africa. He immediately clashed with Captain Green over the brutal treatment of the crew. Green was a hard man who pushed his sailors past their limits. On May 27th, at 1 in the morning, Fly led a mutiny. They dragged Green from his bunk and threw him overboard. When the captain grabbed a trailing rope in desperation, one of Fly's men chopped off his hand with an axe. Green sank. The crew sewed a Jolly Roger, renamed the ship Fame's Revenge, and elected Fly their captain. For 2 months, they raided vessels off the New England coast. Then, Fly made a fatal mistake. He sent most of his loyal men to sail a captured prize, leaving himself with 3 pirates guarding 15 prisoners. The prisoners overpowered them and sailed straight to Boston. At his trial, Fly showed no remorse. The minister Cotton Mather tried to save his soul and was met with contempt. On July 12, 1726, Fly walked to the gallows smiling. He examined the noose, told the hangman the knot was poorly tied, took the rope from his hands, and retied it himself. Then he placed it around his own neck. They hanged him and suspended his body in an iron cage at the entrance to Boston Harbor. Every ship leaving the port passed by it. The message was deliberate. After William Fly, the romance of piracy began to fade. The Navy had learned. The courts had hardened. The age was ending. Olivier Levasseur committed what may be the greatest single theft in pirate history. Nearly 3 centuries later, no one has found what he took. Born in Calais to a wealthy family, Levasseur was educated, trained as an architect, and later became a privateer in service to King Louis XIV. When the war ended and France recalled him home, he became a pirate instead. A battle wound slowly destroyed the vision in one eye. He began wearing a black patch, and in doing so, helped create the image that every child since has drawn when they picture a pirate. On April 26, 1721, Levasseur spotted a Portuguese galleon anchored off Reunion Island. The Nossa Senhora do Cabo was carrying the Bishop of Goa, the Viceroy of Portugal, and 10 years of accumulated colonial treasure. A recent storm had damaged her so badly that the crew had thrown all 72 cannons overboard just to stay afloat. She was completely defenseless. The pirates walked aboard without firing a single shot. They took gold bars, diamonds, silk, pearls, and the fiery cross of Goa, a solid gold crucifix embedded with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds, so heavy that 3 men were required to carry it. When they divided the loot, each pirate's share included 42 diamonds, plus the equivalent of millions in gold. Levasseur spent 9 years hiding. In 1730, authorities finally caught him. He stood on the scaffold on July 7th with the noose already around his neck. According to the witnesses present, he reached into his coat, produced a piece of paper covered in cryptic symbols, and threw it into the crowd below. He shouted, "Find my treasure, those who may understand it." Then they dropped him. The cryptogram has never been solved. The treasure has never been found. Expeditions have searched Reunion Island and the surrounding waters for decades. Nothing. These men were not heroes. They killed, enslaved, and burned their way across the world's oceans. But each of them died in a way that captured something true about who they were. Blackbeard, defiant to the last. Kidd, betrayed by the system he served. L'Ollonais, destroyed by the same violence he perfected. Lowe, abandoned by the only people who could tolerate him. Bonnet, weeping. Caesar, still fighting when it was already over. Fly, correcting his own execution. Levasseur, burying one last secret. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want more stories like this. Comment below with your favorite pirate. There are a few we haven't covered yet, and your answer might decide what comes next.